Mary-Anne, I guess a natural place to start is what we were talking about right before we started recording was this concept of being a manager versus an entrepreneur, right? I find your career fascinating, right? How you've grown and evolved and now running your company. Is it something you think is a distinction that makes sense, or isn't are the two concepts not necessarily opposed?
Are they opposed? I think they're actually joined at the hip. I think, being a manager, that's a big word for me. Um, just because I think we're all managers. Anyone from, low-level manager to the CEO we're all managers because we're responsible for people and we're responsible for resources. So I think it's a big ask for anyone. A lot of people want to be managers, but usually I ask, can you handle it? Why? Because my expectation is that you're going to take care really of the people that report to you and take care of the resources that belong to the company. So there has to be sort of a balance in that, in how you accept it, instead of just having a manager title, having that title, which is really cool. But what does it mean? It means I'm taking care of people. And how do you do that? You help them rise up. Okay. You help them find opportunities and you help them take the path that's best for them. So there's a bit of a selflessness there. And then there's the resources of the company, either present already in the company or coming because you're looking at a bid or you're looking for new business. So that's future resources coming into the company. And you have to take care of that. And how do we do that? By taking care of our clients and potential clients. And that's where, for me, that's where it meets, if that's answering your question.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. It's like you're talking about how like even the concept of entrepreneur for you, it's like something that isn't. It's maybe considered if you're like a serial entrepreneur, but it's like what you just described, like the managing of resources and taking risks,
Mhm.
isn't. It seems to be well in line with like let's say the classic definition of an entrepreneur, which I see you in that mold, right?
Right. Yeah, I mean, entrepreneur, because we talk a lot about that. Who's an entrepreneur? Who, I want to be an entrepreneur. I don't think people wake up and say, I want to be an entrepreneur. I think your personality, and I'm not talking about serial entrepreneurs now, the people who buy and sell businesses, and that's really their work. I'm talking about people who either acquire or buy or start a business and then grow it. They add value. They add value on a regular basis. Um, they are entrepreneurs. Those are the real entrepreneurs for me, because they're adding value and they're changing. They're bringing some kind of change into their area of business. I think you find entrepreneurship at every single level in a company because regardless of what your job is, do you always have to do it the same way every single time? Well, for some people that works, but there's some people, again, it's that personality that's different, that's asking, okay, it was good today. How can I make it better tomorrow? Or, it was good today, but I'm going to be bored to death if I have to do it again the same way every single time. So I'm going to find a different way of doing it. I'm going to either engage other people with me or ask other people who have done it before me to see how they did it in order to add a part of myself in it. And that brings value or that increases output or whatever it is, you're doing. That's entrepreneurship for me. So it's not
Yeah.
necessarily a standalone, I'm starting a business kind of thing. It's I'm improving something. Either I'm starting something, I'm improving something that I'm already working on, or I'm bringing value.
Yeah. And maybe to bounce back and forth between your career was, did you always have ambition and drive to want to be president of a company and kind of reach the upper echelons and have the burden of that responsibility? Like, was it something you had at an early age in your career?
It's funny that you ask that because the answer is yes. The answer is yes. If I think back, because first of all, I get bored very easily. So when I think back at anything I've done, I've always wanted to do it a little better. When I can't remember, I think I was 11 or 12, I started a ballet school in my garage, which probably wasn't the best way to, because of the knees and the concrete or whatever. But it was something, let's put on a show. Let's charge. for the show, even if it's just our parents that are coming. And then it's working in new industries. It's working in something that's maybe complex. But for me, the thing that has always been important is how does it fit with people? You know, people for me, it really is the foundation of everything. Because at the end of the day, I think regardless of the industry you're in, they all resemble each other. Like in healthcare IT, for me, all the solutions at one time, they're going to resemble each other because they do the same thing. You know, they do basically the same thing. They help doctors manage the information that they receive for their patients better. Or, you know, healthcare professionals. So it all does the same thing. So what is really different? How do we differentiate ourselves from other companies that are in the same place? It's the people. Because at the end of the day, it's the people that's going to be using the solution that are going to come to you and say, I have a problem. How is that problem going to be solved? So the how has to do with the people. Are they going to take the time to listen? Do they find that clients are a bother? Or do they realize that we are in healthcare? So the care, should we care health? We're in healthcare, so we have to take care of our clients because they're taking care of patients. So the people make the difference. So it's very important for us that people who come and join us understand that, because at one time we'll all be called upon to be that person who's in front of that particular client that needs help.
Yeah, I love the people being at the center. And I think you made a big point in your company to put the patient at the center. But maybe to talk about your team for a second, because I'd like to unpack this concept. You run a software business, and I think you've been very vocal in saying giving flexibility, giving freedom to people to create. But you also read this quote, which I loved, is like, all excuses are good, but none of them are acceptable. I'm going to so totally steal that quote. So at the same time, you have to have like kind of tough love to a certain extent. So curious as to how you strike that balance between an open, innovative environment, but also driving people to ensure they exceed themselves.
Okay. First, I have to tell you that it was one of my bosses. I mean, I've had amazing bosses. I've had horrible bosses too. I mean, I think we all, it's good to experience this, the spectrum of that, because then we know what kind of manager we want to be and what we should avoid. And one of my bosses said that to me, and it took me a while before I really understood, because I thought it was harsh. And then I thought about it, and I said, okay, so if I'm supposed to do something, but I'm late, or I dropped the ball, or my car ran into a ditch, or whatever the excuse is, they're all good. But it's never acceptable because what I had to do wasn't done. So when I understood that, I looked at it as a different level of commitment. And in order to spread commitment, in order to share commitment, in order to talk about it internally in our teams, I believe you need to be transparent. You need to be honest with people. You need to tell them, first of all, what are you doing and why are you doing it? Because people get it, people get it. And when you lie to them, they know also. And then when you do that and you start building on lies, you start breaking down the trust, you're not going to have the team you want. Maybe you'll get the team you deserve, but you won't have the team you want. Because what you want is to have a team that's tight-knit. Doesn't mean they get along on every subject. No, we're human beings, so we're not going to see eye to eye on everything. But we do understand what we're about. What is the company trying to do? And because it's business oriented, it's not a personal thing. If I say to someone, oh, that report is not good, I'm going to say why it's not good. Either we didn't explain the concept enough, or it has to do with the outcome, what I'm trying to deliver. I'm not saying the report is not good because you don't know how to spell, or you wrote it with it's not a personal, when you can't go into the personal area, because then you start touching the people in a place where I believe we have no right to. So, we're not going to make it personal. I think once you keep it about business, which is what it is, people will join you there, because they want to be there, and they want to be appreciated while they're there. So they're ready to have that discussion. If they accept the criticism, let's say constructive criticisms that you give, It's because they know that you're saying that to make them better. Again, taking care of your team as a manager, that you're not doing it to put them down. Okay. And that is so important.
Yeah, that's really good insight, right? So treating people like adults, right? So like letting them, giving them the critical and constructive feedback when you need to help them grow as individuals and as professionals. So I love that insight. I think I'm going to steal that. And maybe I want to talk about your company a little bit. So Purkinje, like obviously, during a global pandemic, I think people realize the importance of healthcare more than ever. And you've been obviously in this sector for a long time now. So maybe just a quick explanation of what is Purkinje, and then we could talk about also your vision for the company, where you want to take it.
Okay, so we develop and market and support medical software. So software to help doctors and hospitals manage patient information better. So it's basically, when you go to your doctor, they depends on the doctor. They have a file with all these different colored tabs. They have radiology information, they have lab information. You go for blood work, the results come in. So all of that in the past and still today is paper based. Sometimes they fax information in and you stick it in the file. So what we've done is we've digitized all of that. So it's in the software, as part of the software. So you're basically managing information digitally. It's like if you look at your bank, instead of receiving hopefully all your statements by paper, you can go online and see everything and interact. You can make transfers, you can receive payments, you can send payments. So basically, that's what it is in terms of healthcare. So it helps doctors and healthcare providers get and manage information for patient care. And because, if you look at prescriptions, because you're not writing things, you reduce your error by more than 90%. I mean, there's just so many good things and the right things about having a system that manages that I think most people are aware of that. So that's part of our business. Another part of our business is billing for doctors. So we manage and we bill for doctors. So they send in basically, call it their timesheets or information saying where they worked, how they worked, because there are different rates for different times for where they worked, for the department. So they give us that information. We send it to the RAMQ, and the RAMQ pays them. So we have a business that manages that for patients. Sorry, for doctors. So
For
doctors,
doctors, yeah.
yes, for doctors send in their
Yeah.
information.
So like critical infrastructure, right? Like particularly today, if it's like if a minute saves a life, like you guys provide this critical infrastructure for healthcare workers. Do you find it difficult to innovate in a highly regulated field where it's like also a field that's in the public sector that I imagine there's more rules than let's say if you're building just a SaaS company
Mhm.
out for SMBs. Do you find that to be a challenge, or have you successfully navigated those waters?
It's a challenge, but I find it, I would call it an inspirational challenge because you know what you're doing and why you're doing it. When we work on, let's say, the developers work on a code for the lab part of the software, they know what they're doing. They know that a lab result, which is going to tell the doctor what is wrong or right with a particular diagnosis, okay, is going to come through the system that they are coding. So the level of awareness, yes, it's difficult because you need to use certain parameters. There's a lot of legalese wrapped around it, framework, because you have to. But at the same time, you know what you're contributing to that sequence of actions that goes from the doctor asking someone to go for blood work, coming back with the information, and having that conversation again with their patient. So people, I believe, work differently when they know the impact of what they're doing and where it goes. Because what I always say is, if you've never been a patient and you're not a patient today, you will be tomorrow. At one time we will all be there. So how do you want your doctor to work? How do you want it to manage the information? sometimes people say, oh, AI is going to take over and doctor's always going to be needed. It's always going to be needed. Nurses are always going to be needed. What AI does is like a super brain. It basically processes information faster than anyone can, and it gives the information so you can figure out what's the best thing to do. Because there's no way one person can read every single medical information abstract that comes out in their particular field. So I think there's a challenge in that, like I said, but it inspires us to find ways of innovating because we want the information to come out faster, because at the end of that line is a patient. So that's what drives us. And that's why it's not your typical challenge.
Yeah, I find it interesting because it touches upon one of your previous principles, Mary-Anne. You were talking about transparency, treating people like adults, and part of that is buying into the vision and people understanding the impact that they have. I want to go back to this concept of patient centricity or customer centricity, but maybe I want to talk a little bit about competition because it seems like you're swimming in an ocean full of giants. So how do you approach the concept of competition? Right? Is because you must have such a huge market, but at the same time there's these big players. So curious as to how do you approach it? Is something that concerns you, or is it more like, yeah, just curious to pick your brain on it, actually.
Well, we definitely concerns us, and if it didn't, I think we'd have an issue. In one part of the business, the billing for doctors, we are the giant. So, and we want to, we're growing that business. On the other side, we compete against giants that have been on forever. They have deeper pockets. But again, I think it comes down to relationships. We have won against the giants. We have won projects against one of the biggest in the world. Okay. And how did we do that? We bring in the team that we have, because at the end of the day, it's other people that are going to choose who they're going to be working with on a particular project. And we come in flat out, we like to lose early or we like to win early because it costs a lot of money to present a project. So we tell the potential clients, this is what we can do. This is what we cannot do. So if what you want is something we can't do, well, then kick us out now, because that means, we are not there for you and we won't be, unless it's something that you want us to develop later. What some of the big companies do is that there's a stage in a bidding process called a proof of concept, where you really need to show that your software does A, B, and C. As you know, in software development, you can create anything. You can do anything. So some people create just a shell and they use it to show, oh, look, we can do this. And they can answer all the questions that's being asked. And it looks like, yes, they do have the software. Okay, that's a game that we never play. And we say that to potential clients. And we usually encourage them to, you don't want to be the guinea pig. You want the product tested in different places because we are bidding with this particular product. So why don't you make the questions secret? Basically, don't give us the list of your questions beforehand. So we can't develop something because we have 80 people who just code. So we can't create, some kind of fake solution for you and pretend that we have it. So if you keep the questions to yourself, and we do have the solution that you're looking for, during the testing period or the proof of concept, you can ask us any question and we can show you right there on the software we can do it or not. So that happened once. Actually, we won a very good bid based on that because our competitor, they have a canned product, which they bring. And if they can't prove that they can do A, B, and C, because they don't know what A, B, and C would be ahead of time, then it basically levels the playing field for all of us. So the giants are brought to our side, or we are, brought up to their size. But it levels the playing field. So we are talking about what really matters. What matters is, can the solution deliver what the client is looking for? And if there's an issue, who's going to support the client? Because there always will be. There's no perfect software. So when there's a problem, where's the team? and how much it's going to cost. Are you going to come in with a low bid, back end all your all your cost or projection, and then boom, the minute the client is with you, you start, raising your prices, and so those are the kind of games that we don't play. And I think people know that and they trust that. And again, you build a trust internally, you build a trust externally with clients.
Yeah, it's like the way out of the darkness is with a light. So I love that little trick, and like in a sales process, just being open, transparent, and a great way to to win at your own game, right? If you trust your product and what you've developed, is showing customers what you can build. And going back to previous concept of this of patient centricity, right? I think particularly in today, you mentioned if you're not a patient today, you will be tomorrow. I think most people today realize the importance of our healthcare system and why it's important to invest there. What have you done in terms of like tips or tricks to move the entire organization towards having this patient centricity mindset?
Um, we talk about it a lot. I always believe it's better to over communicate than to not communicate enough, because you never know how much people understand. Um, and sometimes you'll need to repeat things often. So I usually repeat things quite often. Um, Once I went for a blood test, and I remember, and I talk about this amongst the teens, and I walk into this clinic, and I see all these people sitting there, and I'm one of them. I'm sitting there, and when I left, I remember driving back, and I was like, it's a beautiful day. The sun was shining. It was late spring, and so the little buds were coming out, and it was absolutely gorgeous outside. And when I came back into the office, I think we had a company meeting or team. No, it was a company meeting with a lot more people. And I just talked about that. That I went this morning. I went to a clinic for a test, and I said, no one sitting there wants to be there. No one. No one wakes up on a gorgeous day like that and thinks, hey, what? I think I'll spend my day in a clinic. You know, Nobody wants to be there. Okay, so our role is to make that patient journey as fast and as secure as possible. So they get the right outcome faster. So the doctor, healthcare professional can give them the right aid in order to get better faster. So we talk a lot about that. And it's all around us. Everything that's happening healthcare wise, it's all around us. So people are connected. They see what's happening, especially now. So they know that they are in the middle of that, and that we are part of that evolution. But I think more as a revolution, we are part of that.
Yeah, that's a great insight. I'm definitely learning quite a bit from our conversation. I like the concepts that you brought up, Mary-Anne, about fast and secure journey. And in the business world, like we often hear customer journey and mapping it out. So like it's the same thing for patients, right? So it's like how do you get a patient in and out of the clinic as fast, securely as possible? And the tools are available today. I feel it's just like the healthcare world is starting to catch up, and now we're starting to see, like, for instance, my parents got vaccinated this week, and it's like confirmed by email. I'm like, finally, like we could do things like, that, the bring the tools that are available. Curious to pick your brain on where you see the industry going, right? The healthcare tech as a whole. Obviously, it seems that we're still in the first inning, that we're still start digitizing this whole sector. So curious as to how you think about the future and where the opportunities lie for your organization.
Okay, well, this pandemic has given us a big, I would say, not just the country, but the world, a big kick in the pants. Because when you reach for information and it's not there, it makes you feel very vulnerable. And you, as the healthcare provider, you don't want to be vulnerable. You need to be sure of what you're doing, and you need that confidence. So I think that, and I hope actually, that governments will find that it's necessary to start on this journey in a very serious way. You know, Instead of waiting for that perfect solution or that perfect, you know, um, solution that's going to give you all the AI that you probably won't even be able to use in your first couple of years. Do one step, you know, get all the papers gone. At least scan them into a system. So if a patient comes in, at least all their information is in one place. And you don't have to go down to the basement, or I can tell you horror stories. You know, there are rooms and rooms in clinics and hospitals that have just paper. So that is a place to start. And I think the industry as a whole will carry, I mean, the ones that are already installed, the hospitals that already, you know, have, let's say, digital information, they'll push for the next step. Basically, I have the information here in this hospital, but what if my patient went to another hospital? Am I going to be able to get that information? So piece by piece, you know, it is also a journey. I think we need to make a commitment that we will do one thing well, do that one thing well, in order to move towards the path of having information like this, any information, but not thinking of a dream. Because I think people sometimes get stuck in this circular rut of, I want to have, you know, all of that is good. You keep it out in front of you, you know, that's where you want to get to. But that first step has to be well defined, and it has to be taken. Let's stop talking about it. Let's just do it. You know, we need to take that first step, whatever the first step is. Because for different clinics and hospitals, they're on different paths, you know, but they have to make that commitment towards, you know, I'm going to go.
Yeah. Is that like the biggest obstacle to avoid? I find that we're going to enter, you know, the next, you know, few years / decade where the government is going to spend a lot, you know, both from a capital expenditure and operational expenditure on technology. And if history is any guide, there's going to be a lot of waste. At least that's my concern. I hope it's not the case.
Mhm.
So do you have any lessons that, you know, you would give to decision makers to avoid, you know, waste in terms of investment? I think you just gave one in terms of like, don't shoot for this shiny object, shoot for the practical one, even if it's like less sexy. So curious to hear you on like how we can be more efficient in the investments that we're about to make.
Okay, well, it's an interesting question. If I think about that, we've seen a lot of waste already. So I think it's easy to go to the source of that and find out, and I think people should do that. I mean, governments should say, okay, so why did we waste that amount of money? Something that you'll see is sometimes governments will decide, oh, I want to build my own solution. I want to do and you know, these solutions exist already. I'm not saying necessarily our solution, but you know, there are other solutions. There are solutions for a lot of things. I understand you want a bilingual one. Yes, well, that exists also. So instead of trying to recreate the wheel, find a wheel that exists already and just add it on so you can move on. Okay? You don't need to recreate it, it exists already. But sometimes it could get tied up in this whole ego thing of, oh, my budget is the biggest, or I have the most employees, and I'm going to build this, you know, machine. You know, we often say inside the company, we have to listen to the client and find out what the client really wants. You know, if the client said, oh, I want to move from A to B, do they need a Ferrari or do they need a bicycle? They'll get from A to B. But in order to determine what mode of transportation you're going to give them, you need to understand them and understand what they need today, what they'll need tomorrow. And when is that tomorrow? Is it 3 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now? And be practical. Because when you're practical, you make incremental change that sticks instead of making a big change that falls apart, which leads to the waste that we were talking about.
Yeah, I think that's a great insight, right? It's like the buy versus build mentality, but also knowing what your core competence is. So without picking a particular example, but just let's say a hospital, like, does it make sense for a hospital to build their own CRM system or their own, you know, like EMR? Probably not. Probably should, like they should stick at what they're good at, which is saving people's lives and taking care of their health, and not be a software
That's right.
company.
And hire experts because they exist. If you cannot hire someone permanently on your team, hire them for the time that you need them. There are many consultants. There's a lot of knowledge in our market. Okay. Instead of thinking that you, regardless if you're the head of your particular team, that you know it, check it, check it against someone who really specializes in that area and see if you're saying the same thing. If you are, great. But it's good to know where are the resources here that I can tap into that's going to make me better, that's going to improve what it is that I've decided to deliver.
Yeah. What do you see as the most exciting market opportunity in the next few years?
Of connectivity. I would say connecting to everything. If I, and I'm not just talking about your Fitbit, but I would like to know, where I am and where every single member of my family is, the people that I'm responsible for, health-wise. I want to know what my doctor's doing. I want to be able to connect with my doctor. And I think, this pandemic has shown us that we can do it without having to walk over. If I have a question, I think having access to information from all areas, as a patient, as someone who's caring for a patient, as the care provider, the healthcare provider, access to correct information immediately is what we want.
Yeah, that's a great point. That people, like, going back to the bicycle scenario, it's like, people just want it to be practical, right, for it to work. Maybe you mentioned something before, you piqued my curiosity, and I don't want to keep you too much more, MaryAnne. This has been great so far.
Mm-hmm.
What are you doing right now to not be bored? You mentioned you get bored easily, so.
Well, I've taken a big step recently. Like I said, we have two parts of the business, and we've hired the best people we can find to head these businesses. So I can say with complete confidence that I can find people who are better in almost everything I do. And that gives me the space and the time to think about acquisitions, to think about giving back, to think about how we define and sustain our culture in the company, because that is really important for me. It's important to keep people happy. It's important to keep people satisfied, and also keep them curious too. What's coming next? So that's where my focus is on more today. So looking at acquisitions, working with people who are experts in their field, gives me more time to do other things and reduces the boredom also. So, looking at a new company to buy, wow, that's exciting. And we're doing it right now. That's excitement, because you never know what's going to happen. There are all types of variables, and it keeps the conversation fresh and spicy and interesting.
Yeah, I think it's good advice to, keep getting pushed out of your comfort zone, and I feel like it's a kind of great place to end, MaryAnne. Maybe final question is, if people want to learn about more about the work that you're doing, what's the best way to connect?
They can look at anything online. I mean, you can look at Purkinje.com. Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. There's so many things on the web. Look at healthcare IT, even just to learn about what that sector is. And next time you see your doctor, sort of look over his or her shoulder and see, are they writing it on paper, or are they inputting it into their laptop or PC? Ask them. That would be interesting.
I've seen that a few times where doctors are writing on paper, and I'm like, it kind of blows my mind that this is still pen and paper world, right? Where it's like, we're only now entering the 21st century. It feels like it took 20 years to come into this century, but yeah, it feels like we're starting to get to it. Yeah, Mary-Anne, like you mentioned before, inspirational challenges. Well, this has been an inspirational conversation. I want to thank you. It's been amazing. Thank you so much for your time.
You're so welcome. Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye.